From September next year, primary schools in England will be required to teach relationships education, including lessons about friendship and families. They'll be age appropriate, but they will reflect that some children have same-sex parents and there's no right to withdraw pupils from those classes.
First time in almost 2 decades, the way children learn about relationships and sex education is changing. Amongst other things, LGBT content is now being included. It's led to mums and dads in Manchester contacting schools worried about what will be taught and when. This morning, parents at Acacia's Primary in Burnage voiced their concerns.
If I don't agree with it, I want to be able to say, I don't agree with that, I don't want them to be taught that. It's our choice, they're our children, you know.
To explain to kids certain things like that, I feel it's too early.
But some children coming to the school will have gay parents, won't they? And it's about equality, isn't it?
Well, I think each parent individually thinks differently, but I personally feel that I wouldn't want my child to learn that from such a young age.
It's really important that we teach children about LGBT and we teach children about the different kinds of relationships they might experience in their life.
Manchester City Council told us that schools have been successfully teaching about relationships and will continue to do so, but understand a small number of parents have expressed concerns. There is also a feeling amongst some parents here that this is just being blown out of all proportion. The guidance to schools is that LGBT content shouldn't be a standalone issue, it should be integrated into teaching and schools can decide how they go about doing that. And if parents don't like it, they still can pull their children out of lessons. The controversy here follows demonstrations by parents in Birmingham over an inclusive educational programme there.
Our children, our choice.
And just a couple of miles away from the school we were at this morning, one LGBT campaigner is preparing to call a public meeting to talk about the issues before things get that far.
It's important to open up a dialogue. Some families have single parents, some families have two mothers. So the idea that that should not be taught, that is simply the way people live.
The new guidance was debated in Parliament last week and had substantial support from MPs in the North West.
LGBT people will be their friends, their families, their teachers, and of course some of the very children being taught.
The changes can be introduced as soon as September this year, but must be brought in by 2020. The City Council say that schools are working with parents to allay any concerns, but there's still a debate over exactly who tells children about sex and relationships and at what age. Sarah Rogers, ITV News in Manchester.
A row between parents and schools in Birmingham over the teaching of sex and relationship education lessons, which include classes on LGBT relationships, has led to some of the schools in the city withdrawing the classes in order to conduct consultations with parents about how to find a middle ground. And now protests have spread to parents of children at 7 schools in Manchester who have expressed their concerns about plans to roll out similar such lessons which they feel sexualise children at too young an age. The parents, of a mainly Muslim background, have had meetings with school leaders, and the schools say dialogue has been constructive.
We are planning to do a meeting for parents later this term to explain where we are with the new curriculum. A significant issue with our parents seems to be linked to LGBT. And our approach has always been that we do not promote any particular sexuality.
In a radio appearance, the leader of the House of Commons, Andrea Leadsom, said that parents should have the right to withdraw children from such classes.
Parents should be able to choose the moment at which their children become exposed to that information, and there are steps taken to enable parents to withdraw their children from classes up until a certain age.
But in an emotional speech in Parliament earlier, Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle took offence to Ms Leadsom's interview. Mr Russell-Moyle, who is gay and the first MP to reveal he's HIV positive, blasted the Prime Minister and called on her to condemn what he called bigots who didn't want LGBT voices to be heard in schools.
The Prime Minister campaigned to keep Section 28, which banned LGBT people being talked about positively in schools and led to millions of young people like myself growing up in fear of being LGBT. I thought the Prime Minister had seen the error of her ways, but this morning the Leader of the House said on radio that parents should decide when they're exposed to LGBT education. This is Conservative Party dog whistle politics. Will the Prime Minister condemn the Leader of the House? Will she condemn bigots that don't want LGBT people to be heard in schools? And will she support Ofsted with good LGBT education in our schools?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I'm very happy to write to him with the detail of the guidance that is given to schools on LGBT education and teaching. I think it is important. My right honourable friend, the Minister for Women and Equalities, Secretary of State for International Development, has been at great pains to ensure, working with the Department for Education, that appropriate guidance is given to schools. And I will write to him. I recognise the issue that the honourable gentleman has raised, and I will write to him with the details of the guidance, because it is very clear about what is appropriate.
The issue looks set to rumble on ahead of government plans to roll out compulsory relationship and sex education lessons from September of next year, and a battle will be waged between the power of the state to dictate what should and shouldn't be taught in schools, and a parent's right to decide and object.
A very dangerous, mind-altering program which is designed to attack our beliefs.
At the gates of a primary school in Birmingham, opposition to plans to teach the children about same-sex relationships. The programme was called No Outsiders, but it's now been dropped after parents took around 600 pupils out of the school. The protests here have highlighted growing wider concerns about government proposals to introduce relationships education into all primary schools in England next year.
We've had so many people protesting, and they've not all been Muslim, by the way.
Nasim Ashraf is a father from Oldham. He says his children are too young to learn about same-sex relationships, and he's hearing similar concerns from parents across the country.
There are people from the Jewish community, people from the Christian community, atheists, agnostics, Hindus, etc. They've all been saying exactly the same thing. Our parental rights are being breached.
From September next year, primary schools in England will be required to teach relationships education, including lessons about friendship and families. They'll be age appropriate, but they will reflect that some children have same-sex parents, and there's no right to withdraw pupils from those classes. These are sensitive social issues, but I understand that the counter-extremism unit at the Department for Education is monitoring the protests. There's concern that legitimate opposition to government policy is being hijacked by those with a religious extremist agenda. And there are similar concerns being expressed by some head teachers.
Some parents have been harassed and intimidated into signing letters they didn't want to sign, or taking a leaflet, or if they don't take a leaflet, they're being told horrific things, like you'll rot in hell if you don't take this leaflet, you're not a proper Muslim. So really nasty tactics.
Opposition to the introduction of relationships education appears to be growing, with more protests being planned for later this week. Angus Walker, ITV News.